Warning: some contents may be disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. I guess I have a strange glitch or a personal Mandela effect situation that I haven't been able to figure out and probably never will. My apologies if this is somewhat boring or too short. It's not really a long story, nor is it super crazy. It's just really weird to me, and I can't find an explanation for the whole thing. For a little context, I'm not huge into the paranormal, nor do I believe that we live in a simulation, and I'm not under the influence of anything. But this is something that has bothered me ever since it happened. My cousin, I'll call him Danny, was my best friend growing up. I lived in a neighborhood that had next to zero kids, so he and I would always be spending time together. My favorite childhood memories are from when he and I would play Pokemon Red and Blue on our old school Game Boys, because we would just sit there for hours playing through the game, trading the Pokemon, and battling each other to see who had the stronger monsters. In fact, it's because of him that I got my then favorite Pokemon, Alakazam. It's not really relevant, but to get Alakazam, you have to trade your Kadabra with another person and then it evolves. There are a few Pokemon from back then that did this, and I remember that we pretty much finished the Pokédex in both of the games because we played together. It may not seem like it's important, but I remember getting to the 150th mark on the game, which is not something that you could do without two people, or at least two games and Game Boys. When I was 12, Danny's parents, so my aunt and uncle, decided to move to another part of the state. It was pretty far away, so we never really got to see each other after this, as my parents never wanted to go that way and I couldn't drive. So I moved on, and I grew up with pretty much no other friends. Not trying to garner any pity or anything, just saying. And then, when I was around 17, my aunt and uncle wanted to have a good-sized party for Danny's 18th birthday and also his graduation. It was seemingly a really big deal for them, so they invited everyone over and wanted the entire family to come and celebrate. I was stoked. I hadn't seen him for 5 years, and I had planned on giving a short speech during the party about how much spending time with him as a child meant to me. I was going to make a joke about how we spent hours playing Pokemon, and I wanted to get an Alakazam card to give to him as a joke, only to find out that they don't print Alakazam cards. Look it up, it's pretty stupid. So, I just planned on giving my little speech and that was that. When we got there, I was actually thankful that I didn't get the Alakazam card for him, because apparently, none of my childhood memories playing Pokemon with Danny happened. That's right, nothing that I just said is a thing that happened in my current existence. My cousin Danny, the one that spent hours with me playing Pokemon, traded me the Alakazam that I cherished and beat his Pokemon with 100 times. He was born blind. He has, apparently, never been able to see anything, ever. And the reason that this was a big celebration wasn't just because he was graduating, but because of how much he had struggled with trying to get through high school with his disability, and how proud everyone was of him for making it. Obviously, I'm pretty damn proud of him too, but I don't get how this is possible. For the record, this is the same Danny as the one that I grew up with. Same red, seemingly windswept hair, same green eyes, and the same goofy attitude. Except this Danny cannot see and has never been able to. Being unable to see means there's no way that he could have ever played the Pokemon games with me, and my entire childhood is one big false memory. I'm not going to lie, it actually hurts the hell out of me to know this, and there's really nothing that I can do about it. There were no other cousins that lived near me. There were no other kids that it could have been, and obviously, I didn't just imagine it all or dream that it all happened. I'm devastated that my best friend as a kid just didn't exist in this reality. It's been years since all of this happened, and we're both in our 30s now. But I still think about this all quite often, and I honestly miss the Danny that I knew and grew up with in the other timeline. I'm originally from England, and I'm going to be a bit vague with this, but I was born and raised in Essex. When I hit my adult years, I was given the opportunity to come over to the US to further my education, and I took it. A long story short, I ended up getting married, and I have lived in Chicago area ever since. I think that's enough backstory to really explain who I am and why things were going on when this glitch took place. A few years ago, I decided that I wanted to take some time off and then fly back overseas to visit my parents. It had been a while since I had seen my hometown, and I figured that it would be a nice way to spend a couple of weeks in the summer. Unfortunately, my husband couldn't take the time off from work, and we decided that we didn't want to take our 6-year-old son on an airplane to another country. But he was able to at least take the day off to take me to the airport and then pick me up when I returned. On the day that I was supposed to leave, we ended up waking up late because our alarms seemingly didn't go off, and I was freaking out about possibly missing my flight. I remember that the whole morning was chaotic, and I felt like I was going crazy. Thankfully, I had already taken the time to pack and get my luggage in my car that night before, so we didn't lose too much time. But I remember that I was feeling like I was in a major panic attack the entire time. I remember checking my ticket, checking the departure times, and I recall that I had around an hour and a half at most to get there and then get through everything. Honestly, I was fairly upset. We had both set several alarms to make sure that I got up on time and didn't miss the flight. When we got to the airport, I remember him parking and getting my son out so that we could say goodbye before I actually went through security. But something felt really off. Again, I know that's vague, but I'll explain it the best that I can. The minute that I walked through the doors of the airport, the air felt heavier and the overall mood felt solemn. It almost felt like time slowed down and like everyone that walked by was staring at me as they passed. I know that sounds really weird, but it's honestly the best way that I can explain what just happened. Something changed as soon as I walked in those doors, and I have no idea what it was or why it happened. Anyways, I get my luggage checked in and everything all taken care of, and I'm rushing through the process so that I can get through security as quickly as possible. I'm making a quick walk back toward the gate, and my husband and son are trying to keep up. When he asked why I'm rushing so much, I just kind of stared at him. Did he not remember how much we were panicking this morning to get out the door and get here? I told him that we were running late and that I needed to get through security ASAP. To which he looked at his wrist and then back at me and then dropped a bombshell that confused the hell out of me. He stares at me confused and then says that my flight doesn't leave for around 3 hours. I was shocked by him saying this. I had an hour and a half left when we left. Had he just remembered the time wrong? I ask what he's talking about, and I pull up my ticket to look at the departure time, and he's right. 2 hours and 43 minutes before my flight. I asked him how that was possible. We woke up late, and I asked why we were freaking out so much to leave the house if we had that much time left to go. He again stares at me confused and explains that we woke up on time. He completely disregards my statement and tells me that the entire morning has been a smooth ride and that everything has gone as it was supposed to. I mentioned the alarm's not going off, and he says that his alarm went off and that he woke me up that morning. He then tells me that he noticed about halfway here that I was looking upset, and he kind of just chuckled and asked if it was because I thought that I was late. I just told him no, and then moved on. I honestly was done trying to explain it. I have no idea what the hell happened when I walked through those doors, but it was as if my entire morning had been reset to how it was supposed to be, and we weren't late. There was no panic, and we had woken up on time to the alarms. I distinctly remember all of this though. There's no doubt in my mind that my version of events happened. I just don't think they happened in whatever timeline that I shifted to. Back when I was in my early 20s, I worked for a certain retail store that doesn't really exist anymore. It's a certain store that started with a K and ended with a major bankruptcy. Sorry, that was a bad joke. Anyways, I worked for Kmart when I was in my 20s, and I had the amazing job of cleaning the store up when people made it a mess, which was incredibly frequent. There was one weekend near the end of the year where we were running a number of sales to try and make higher sales numbers for the Christmas season, and I was working double shifts because I was the only janitor that was employed at the store at that time. My town is a decent size, and while I like to believe that I had a lot of friends and know a lot of people, there's no way that I could know everybody. But we had a lot of people coming in and buying a ton of stuff for the holidays. It was in the middle of one of my shifts that I was running the floor cleaner over one half of the store, and I pulled down an aisle that had a few young ladies standing there checking out the makeup. I try not to push the cleaner down aisles where there are people, but by the time that I noticed that they were there, I had already made the turn, so I figured that I would just take it slow. As I got closer, I noticed one of the girls a little more than the other because she was, to me, incredibly attractive, but also somewhat familiar. I was single at that time, and like I said, in my 20s, so I puffed up a bit and I tried to clean the floor with some extra gusto. As I approached the trio, I kind of tried to make eye contact with the one that I wanted to notice me by glancing over at her every few moments. But then, the weirdest thing happened to me. She looked up at me, and we made eye contact, and I felt like I knew her. I don't mean like she kind of looked familiar. I felt like I knew her very, very well. And as I approached, I slowed the floor cleaner, and the two of us just locked eyes and stared for a few moments. After a couple of seconds, she sort of tilted her head and said, "Tony?" And then she mentioned my last name, and I immediately responded with, "Claire," and then mentioned her last name. It felt as if the two of us had known each other for years, though I knew for a fact that neither of us had ever seen each other before this exact moment. We both tried to place where we knew each other for a few moments. I asked her where she went to high school, and she mentioned that she attended a school an entire state over and had just moved there. We talked about summer camps that we attended, places that we work, and hell, we even started talking about family to see if maybe the other has a friend of the family. but neither of us could place the other at all. There was literally no way that we knew each other or could have known the other one prior to this moment. But we knew each other's names, and I felt like I knew what she liked and who she was as a person. Really, it was one of the weirdest moments of my life, as it was like the second that we met eyes, we each downloaded the other's information, if that makes any sense to you. We really could not place the other in our lives anywhere, but it almost felt like we were childhood friends. Well, after a few awkward moments, we basically told each other that it was nice to see each other, and then we went about our business. I went back to cleaning the store, and she and her friends went back to looking at the makeup. I wish that there was more to this though, and that we became friends. But we honestly never saw each other again at all. I remember her name, and I've tried to look her up on Facebook, but I can't find anyone with her name. The only thing that I can think of is that we were supposed to know each other, or somehow knew each other in another life, and the information all flooded back when we saw each other. It's one of those moments that I will never forget, and I guess that it was pretty cool how it all happened. But really, it weirded me the hell out for a while, and it never left my mind. I have a weird thing that happened with myself and my mother that I don't know if it's a glitch in the Matrix or some kind of parallel universe situation, but it was weird as hell, and honestly, it freaked me out. So, to give you just a bit of perspective and show you how things are normally, I live about an hour or so away from my parents, and we're all really close. I've always been super close with my mom, and I genuinely love my dad. So when I moved out, things were very difficult for all of us. Because of that, we made a promise that we would meet up every other weekend on Sunday evening for dinner. That way, we got to see each other on a regular basis, but it wasn't too intrusive, and no one had to drive too much to make it work. Of course, it was always me driving to their place, so it was more to help me not have to spend too much on gas. There have been very few instances where I was unable to make it, or had an issue that would prevent me from driving over to their place, and if that happened, we would either put it off a week or they would just come over to my place instead. Usually, we would just push it off to the next week, but they had been over once or twice. On these days, I would always leave at 1 in the afternoon to be there around 2, and I would stay until about 10, basically spending all my afternoon and evening with them. If I was running late, I would always call them and let them know, or if we had to cancel, I would call them too. Alright, so with all of that out there was what I guess you can call an event that happened during one of our weekends last year that was really, really weird. It was October because it was starting to get cooler, but it wasn't yet snowing. On this particular weekend, that Sunday to be exact, I was leaving the grocery store and had somehow managed to get a large roofing nail in my tire. I'm not sure how, but that's not really important. I just got home and saw that there was a decent-sized nail sticking in the side of the tire. I did the whole check with soapy water, and sure enough, it was bubbling. So not only was there a nail, it was leaking air. And because of where the nail was, I wasn't willing to drive and have it cause a blowout. So I called my mom's cell phone to let her know that I wasn't going to make it. But strangely enough, she didn't answer. I figured that she was probably busy, so I called my dad, and he also didn't answer. At this point, I was a bit confused, but again, they are adults. They aren't always glued to their phones. so I assumed that they were just really busy with something. I called my mom's phone one more time and I decided to leave a voicemail. I remember what I said in the voicemail verbatim, and yes, it is important to this event. I said, "Hey mom, I wanted to call and let you guys know that we're gonna have to cancel this weekend because I have a nail in my tire. I'll take it in this week and we can just meet up next Sunday." I said those exact words, and I know that that was what I said because it was what happened. And after that, I just went about my business, made myself dinner, did some work, and then went to bed. Cue the next morning where all hell had seemingly broken loose. I woke up to multiple texts and missed calls from my mom, but all of them were from that morning at around 5 and 6 in the morning. I immediately called my mom to check in, thinking that something had happened, and then she asked me if I was okay. I told her that I was fine, and I asked her what was going on. She then asked me why I never showed up last night and why I wasn't answering my phone. I told her that I never got a call from her last night, and then I mentioned the voicemail that I left for her asking if she got it. That's when it got weird. She said, "The voicemail you left saying that you were running late?" I was a bit confused, but then I said, No, the voicemail where I said that I wasn't going to make it because of the nail in my tire." We went back and forth on this for a while, but really weren't getting anywhere. So I asked her if she and Dad wanted to drive up for lunch or something since I was off that day, to which she agreed. They drove up and we went to get food, and then I decided to ask about what was going on the previous night. I was blown away by what they said. My mom said that at around 11 that day, she had gotten a voicemail from me that said that I was running late and that I would be around at 4 instead of 2. She said that she called me back, but my phone was going straight to voicemail, so she left me a message and then also sent me a text saying that it was okay. 4 o'clock rolls around and they were concerned, so they tried calling me again. And once more, my phone was going to voicemail. They had both tried calling and texting me multiple times, but I wasn't responding to them. She said that they then called my brother, who lives around 15 minutes to the north of me, and asked to come by and check on me. He claims that he got here, and the lights were off and no one answered the door. They said that they had been trying to get a hold of me all night, and they were calling hospitals and police stations seeing if I had been arrested or gotten into an accident. She even showed me her voicemail and had me listen to it, but it was the weirdest thing because while I could hear my voice saying, "I'm running late," it sounded choppy, like it was fading in and out. They showed me all the outgoing calls and the texts that they sent, and even the timestamps of when they called my brother. And based on this, he showed up to my house around 7 that night when I was sitting on my couch watching Netflix and eating my spaghetti that I had made. I was seriously confused and conflicted. I told them that I had called and then said that I wasn't going to be there because of the nail in my tire. I told them that I was home the entire night. Basically, my night was the polar opposite of what they said happened. I was home and no one ever showed up to my door. It wasn't like my brother went to the wrong place. He comes over all the time and he definitely knows where I live. So yeah, that's my one weird thing that happened to me in my life and my one experience with a parallel universe, or matrix glitches or whatever. I lived one night and left a specific message, but for some reason, the wires of reality got crossed and I was stuck in one reality while they were in a different one. I have no logical explanation for this, and if anyone has any idea, I would appreciate it. But beyond that, it was just really freaky. Around Christmas 2023, I had put my son down for a nap in his playpen in the playroom downstairs. I went into the living room, sat on my couch, and then started watching The Office on TV as I folded laundry. When I finished, I pulled my blanket over me and I laid down on the pillow that my son had brought into the living room earlier that morning. And I dozed off soon after. A short time later, I woke up to my baby crying. I remember looking out the window and wondering how long I'd been asleep because it was dark outside. I checked my phone that was plugged into the charger on the arm of the couch for the time, and it was almost 7. I specifically remember looking at the Christmas tree as I walked by. I walked back to the playroom, changed his diaper, walked into the kitchen to throw away the diaper, and then make him a bottle. After I gave him his bottle, I walked back into the living room to lay back down on the couch. But my pillow and my blanket were gone. The laundry was still folded beside, but the couch looked untouched. Even my phone was gone. I looked in all the rooms that I had gone in, and even the bathroom, and I thought that it must have fallen in the couch. Around that time, my boyfriend was getting home from work, and I asked him to call my phone because I couldn't find it. And I heard it ringing upstairs in our bedroom. I hadn't been upstairs at all, and I was freaked out at this point. Me and my boyfriend go up to our bedroom to find my phone plugged up to the charger beside my bed, and on my bed was my blanket and pillow, as if I was asleep in my bed the whole time. I was so confused because I know for a fact that I never walked up or down the stairs, and the TV in the living room was still on The Office. I still think about it all the time, and the only way that I can make sense of it is me having experienced a glitch. So I have a glitch story that some could look at and equate as a potential false memory, or something that my brain just made up when I was younger. But I've always had a fantastic memory, and I know for a fact that all of this happened how I remember it. On top of that, and something that I find interesting, is that every single time that I try to think about this or tell the story to someone, I start to get this weird feeling that I'm about to have a panic attack, which almost feels as if the Matrix, or whatever it is that controls our simulative reality, is trying to get me to forget the old timeline and accept this new one. That said, I remember all of this as it actually happened, and I refuse to be pushed into some alternative timeline that isn't true. This happened back when I was 12, which was about 10 years ago. And now I know that some of you may say, you were a kid, so you probably just don't remember it right. But I promise you that I remember all of this very vividly and in intricate detail. At this point, my family lived in a small house in Missouri. I'm not going to say where specifically for security reasons. It was just myself, my parents, and my brother, and we were fairly separated from most of our family, with the exception of our aunt on our mother's side. The start of this whole event happened when my paternal grandmother passed away. It was the end of June, and my brother and I were out of school for the summer when my parents got a call. Apparently, my grandmother had died unexpectedly and suddenly in her sleep, and my grandfather was trying to figure everything out in a panic. The problem was that, as stated, his only son, my father, lived in Missouri, and they lived in upstate New York. At this point, my dad makes a firm decision that he needs to fly up north to help his father take care of everything, and my mother says that she's going to go with him as he would need the emotional support. It was decided that my brother and I would stay with my aunt in St. Louis while my parents flew out to New York to take care of my grandfather and my grandmother's affairs. Here's what I remember happening. I remember my aunt coming to get my brother and I remember loading my stuff into the car alongside my brother, and I remember telling my parents goodbye. I specifically remember telling my parents that I hoped that they enjoyed New York. I remember this because it was something stupid to say. They were going for a funeral. They weren't going to enjoy it at all. Anyways, after that, I remember getting in the car with my aunt, and as we were driving, she then tells us that we were going to go to Six Flags during the week that we were staying with her. I remember being incredibly excited for it, and I remember the two of us genuinely having an amazing time with my aunt and also my uncle, just going on all the rides, and that I specifically loved the roller coasters. And overall, it was probably the best week of my childhood. We got to spend time with my aunt and uncle. They didn't have kids, so they spoiled us rotten. We also got to go to Six Flags and really just had a great week that summer. When we got home, my parents were already back at the house, and I know that I've said this a few times, but I specifically remember that my father gave me a snow globe that had the skyline of New York. This globe was absolutely gorgeous, and that I genuinely loved everything about it. It was one of my prized possessions as a child, and I kept it on a shelf. I never really touched it, but I always knew that it was there, and I genuinely adored it. Now, here is where the glitch or timeline shift happened. When I hit 19, I was ready to move out of the house and into my own apartment. A friend of mine and I had saved up the money to pay what we needed, and we both had a steady job for our age. We were excited to move forward with our lives. When I was packing up my room and boxing away all of my stuff, I got to the point where I was clearing off my shelf, and I paused. There were various little knickknacks, items, trophies from school, but no snow globe. I just kind of sit there and stare for a moment, trying to think about where I could have put what I considered to be one of my most cherished items as a child. I called my mom into my room, and I asked her if she or dad had moved my snow globe to another shelf in the house or if they had seen it. My mom then asked me what snow globe I'm talking about. I tell her the one that she and dad got for me from New York. My mother just stares at me confused and says that she and dad had never been to New York. When she said this, I started to feel incredibly strange inside, almost like that panic attack feeling that I mentioned before. I stepped down from the ladder, and I tried to ask if she was feeling okay, and if she had forgotten when the two of them went to New York when Grandma died. She again asked what I was talking about. I called my dad into the room and tried to talk to him about it, and he was just as confused, saying that they never went to New York ever. I tell them that when I was 12, Grandma had passed away, and Grandpa was panicking because he didn't know what to do. I said that the two of them flew to New York to help him out, and my aunt came to get my brother and I, and we stayed with her in St. Louis, and that we all went to Six Flags while we were there. And then, it got even more confusing. My dad's face twisted into genuine confusion, and he said, "Yes, when you were 12, my mother passed away unexpectedly. But they lived in Chicago. We drove you to your aunt's house on the way there. She didn't come and get you." So now, with this said, I live in a timeline where my grandparents lived in Chicago and not New York. In this timeline, my aunt also didn't come get us. My parents supposedly drove us to St. Louis on their way to Chicago. And they never brought back a snow globe, and they drove and they didn't fly. I don't understand how any of this is possible when I have a very vivid memory of the situation and I recall having that snow globe my entire childhood. What's really weird is that I cannot recall the last time that I actually saw that snow globe, and I am struggling to remember anything past getting it and putting it on my shelf. And every time that I think about it, the memories are foggy and I start to get that anxious feeling. Like I said, I know this may be incredibly mundane to others, but to me, it's one of the creepiest things that has ever happened. Have you ever met someone new and it felt like you've known them your whole life? No, I'm not talking about the stupid romantic love at first sight kind of bullshit either. But like, you meet someone and they look familiar. You can guess things about them to the T, but you've never known them prior. I work for an insurance company. I'm the one who reviews the financial records for businesses to make sure that they're paying for insurance premiums and workers' comp and etc. It's not a very exciting job, but I've also been doing it for years, so the pay is pretty good. One day, we decided to hire a new person. It happened last year, and I'll call her D. No big deal, right? People come and go, move up, leave, whatever. So I just thought that it would be a new person that would ask me a lot of questions at the beginning. Someone who I could talk to in passing, have meetings with, and so forth. However, when I met her, she immediately looked so familiar. So I tried to place her. Maybe I've seen her at the gym that I go to, maybe at a restaurant, or maybe she lives in the same apartment complex as me. But I don't think much of it and I just go about my life. After a few days though, I get to talk to her more since I basically help with the job training, and some of her mannerisms and the way she talks is so familiar. So I finally broke down and asked her where she used to work or live or gym membership, and to my surprise, she wasn't even from this state. She moved from Tennessee to here in South Dakota because of a job opportunity that her husband was offered. I've never been to Tennessee, and she has never been here. So, okay, fine. She probably just looks like someone else or one of those deja vu moments. But it gets weirder from here. I start to think maybe I just feel like I know her because we get along so well, right? She's very polite, but also sly with her insults, like you may not even catch it. And when she's on the phone and she lets one slide, she always looks at me with her cheesy grin like, "Did you catch that?" Which I find hilarious. I never really had one that I could do that with at work, in fear of people taking it the wrong way. So I always had to just hold it in and share it with my husband when I got home. She's also very intelligent. She went to a local community college for business, but she was super knowledgeable about health or biology, or whatever you want to call it. The reason this is so important is because I happened to call her out about it accidentally. I mentioned that I was having issues with heartburn at some point, and I just figured that it was because of the coffee that I drink in the morning, or maybe what I had for dinner the night before. But she mentioned that I should go to the doctors about it, as it may be more serious. It didn't really occur to me that it could be something worse, but I am a smoker, so I figured that it wouldn't hurt, right? Surprisingly, our insurance company has great insurance too. So I went, and come to find out, I had a problem. This actually helped a lot to have an answer and ways to help manage it, and it also got me to quit smoking. Anyways, I brought this up to her and I thanked her for it, but I happened to make a comment about how it was weird that she knew, but we both made a comment about how her mom was a nurse. We both paused and she asked, "Did I already tell you that?" But she didn't. I just shrugged and I said, "Good guess." We then moved on from it, but I seriously have no idea how I guessed her mom was a nurse. The things I happened to know about her before she told me started becoming overwhelming. It became a running joke between us that I must have looked her up before she was hired. I guessed that she had an older and younger brother, or that she was a middle child. I also guessed that she liked painting and biking. I even guessed that she was in a bad accident as a teenager, and she made me guess where her scar was. I guessed that it was on her right leg, but it was actually her left leg. The reason I guessed right leg, though, was because I was in a bad accident as a teenager and I had a scar on my right leg, which also leads to the oddity of this. And the reason that I was able to guess all of this was because it was so similar to my own life. I was the middle child. I had an older sister and a younger brother. I loved painting, even though she was way better at it though. My mother was a vet though, but that's also some kind of doctor, right? I even moved here from North Dakota for my business/accounting degree, and I met my husband here, so we stayed. We shared other similarities and even looked kinda similar. Long, curly light brown hair with hazel eyes and a similar build. Even our husbands looked similar. Our views and opinions are even dead on similar. We've become so close, I even went with her to Tennessee when her mother had an emergency and was in the hospital for a week. Again, I had never been there, but it felt so familiar. When we went to the hospital, I seemed to know exactly where to enter and what floor to go before we even saw the map and the setup. How would I even have known any of this? Obviously, because of this, it has led us to become incredible friends. Sure, it's cheesy, but we can even finish each other's thoughts and sentences just like it's nothing. We hang out constantly, and the four of us are usually together every weekend. We even try to find an apartment close to each other so that we could ride to work together. I am incredibly lucky to have met someone like this, but then I cannot help but wonder, were we supposed to be the same person? Were we supposed to be in different timelines and something crossed? Is that why I seem to know all of these things about her? I've talked to her about this and she finds it intriguing, but she has no knowledge on my past and couldn't guess any of it. Did I do something at some point that caused a glitch or a parallel universe of some sort to merge? So, this may seem a bit lame when it comes to glitch stories, but to me, it's really strange. Some backstory that may or may not seem really all that relevant. I am 27 years old, and I work in computer network systems. When I was in high school, I took all the computer classes that I could in order to get myself in a position that I would be comfortable working with computers and such on a daily basis. I didn't really expect to go into network systems, but I found my niche and I'm comfortable in what I do now. I make decent money, and while my actual dream was to become a software developer, I'm fairly happy with my life as it is. I even took a year of intro to programming when I was in high school. It was basically a primer with all the overall structure of programming, how to properly write a code, and even some projects using Python. It was a super basic class, but I had a good time in it, and I learned a few things over the year that I had the class. Honestly, it's one of my favorite classes, mostly because the teacher was a super funny guy and it was all about making the class and learning the concepts fun. I remember that we actually had a few projects. One where we had to write pseudocode to program a robot to do our homework. There was also a group project where we had to actually do a full stack mock-up. That's everything from the front end to the back end, by the way. So, user interface to the background code. I promise you that all of this is important, and there's a reason that I'm mentioning it. Fast forward to this last year in 2020, and my brother landed a job as a back-end software developer. Basically, he writes the code that works on the actual back end of the system. He's a year younger than me, and he's always kind of followed in my footsteps, up to and including my interest in IT and coding. Unfortunately, my love for coding stopped after high school. It may have been one of my favorite classes, but I wasn't any good at it, and I tried my damn best to get the hang of it. That said, he took it super quick and he learned the ins and outs of coding, and he was beyond proud to have landed this gig. So, all this out of the way, here's where the weirdness actually starts to kick in. When my brother told me that he got the software development job, I was ecstatic. I told him congrats, and we had some excited idle chit-chat. Then, I made a quick joke about how he better be careful, or else I would ask him to get me a job with him. He laughed and then responded with, "You never liked programming. You wouldn't want to do this job." I then reminded him that I took a programming class in high school because I wanted to be a software developer, and his humored laugh turned into a confused stare. He then tells me that I never took a programming class and that if I had, he would remember it. I then told him that it was Mr. Smith's programming class that I learned the basics, and then we also learned some Python. He then tells me straight that Mr. Smith never taught a programming class and that I never took a fundamentals of coding class. We bantered back and forth for a few minutes, and I bet him dinner that I would get my transcripts and prove to him that I did take this class. He took me up on it, so I went upstairs into my office and I pulled my education documents out of the drawer of my desk, which is basically just my degrees and transcripts in case I ever needed them. I sort through them until I get to my high school transcript, and I start going over the years. I go over them once, and I don't see a programming class. I started thinking about it, and I figured that it must have been my junior year based on how long I had left. And I remembered that a buddy of mine took the class with me, and he was a year ahead of me, so it would have had to have been before senior year. I comb over the classes, and according to my new transcript, I never took a coding class with Mr. Smith. This class that I distinctly remember taking, that I remember all the projects, the basics, the topics that we went over, it never existed, and I never learned anything about any of it. What's really confusing to me is that in junior year, there's now a class that I took that I don't remember. Introduction to Photography and Videography, something that I have absolutely zero interest in, yet I apparently took it for a year. Even more interesting, this class was instructed based on the documentation by a David Smith, the Mr. Smith that I remember teaching the programming class. I somehow ended up in a timeline where my education changed, and I apparently never learned something that I remember learning. I know that one possibility is that my official transcript is incorrect. I just don't think that that's the case, honestly. These are official documents that I've had them for 8 years, and I feel like I would have noticed that there was an incorrect class in my document when I submitted them for my college application, or when I graduated and got them. In the end, I guess I'm just crazy, and I remember stuff that I never learned. And unfortunately, I'm still no good at it. Oh, and I had to buy my brother Chipotle. It was his choice. Before I get into the post, I'd like to say that I'm not just missing or imagining things. I am constantly hyper aware of my surroundings, and I pay attention to every little detail or whatever I'm focusing on. It's a bit of a curse, and I wish that I could turn it off. There are lots of things that I thought was some supernatural bullshit before I thought or talked about it, and I realized that it was just me mistaking something for something else or whatever. I have been working at a fast food chain for 2.5 years now, working part-time before I graduated and full-time now and during previous summers. I have seen a lot of things that absolutely do not make sense, and I'm gonna start with more minor things and work my way up to the bigger things. Customers exclusively come in waves. The restaurant is right next to a busy major interstate freeway, with a few casinos and malls around it. The traffic around our restaurant never stops. It's either a lot of cars or bumper-to-bumper cars out to the interstate. So, you would think that it would be a random amount of customers depending on how much traffic there is. Well, if only. Customers come in waves, usually 3 or 5 at a time. Outside of the early morning, it is never just one customer unless it's one of our regulars. The NPCs, as some cynical Zoomers might say, only and only come in waves, like it's fucking Plants vs. Zombies. I'll have a story about this later in the post. The customers that come in these waves are usually completely illogical, both in appearance and in their actions. Think like an old white lady in the driver's seat and a 12-year-old in the passenger seat, and then a middle-aged black dude in the back. Just completely random selections of people every time, and they are never happy. No amount of good customer service will ever make them not irritated and passive-aggressive. Unless we are slammed with customers, I maintain good customer service and a cheery voice. I say hello when they get to the window, and I communicate with them and tell them to have a great day. Basically, I do a lot more than I have to, and more than most other fast food employees too. And still, I would say that 9 out of 10 customers are entirely displeased with me at all times, and sometimes they will clearly go out of their way to piss me off. One of the oddest things that can happen is when they get lost. This usually happens in the rare occurrence when only one customer shows up. A customer gets to the menu, irritatedly orders an expensive and complex order, and I tell them to come to the second window. And then, nothing. We have a CCTV camera routed to a monitor that lets us always see what's going on in the drive-thru. The drive-thru is enclosed with high curbs on both sides, and beyond that, there's a chain-link fence on one side and either trees and shrubbery, or the restaurant itself on the other. You watch them pull from the menu and then further into the drive-thru, and then they just don't show up. If they backed out, I would see them, and if I didn't see them, they'd hit the wait plate under the menu, and I'd get a beep on my headset. There is absolutely no way to get out of that drive-thru short of driving by the window where we would see or hear you, or backing out by the menu where we would also see and hear you. And this happens at least once a month. The customers act completely different depending on who's working too. It is absolutely bizarre, and everyone has noticed this. It is completely calibrated to piss whoever is on the headset off the most. I have learned to keep a cool and a detached state of mind as to not get too mad or frustrated with this job. The more frustrated you get, the more you feed into the drive-through things. There's a night manager who's worked here for 16 years with anger management issues that will actively make something to be pissed off about if there isn't any reason to be mad. When he comes into work, we immediately get swarmed by a constant barrage of pissed off customers the entire time that he's here. Me and another manager who are in tune with all of this spiritual bullshit enjoy very quiet and relaxed days relative to what others go through simply by working with the knowledge that our suffering and irritation is their goal. The other day, my parents called me to tell me that my foster kitten had died, and as my mood went from good to bad, we immediately get swarmed with customers for hours as I was choking back tears. They will change their demeanor, demographic, in order to adapt to whoever is working. One time, when my boyfriend was working the drive-thru late at night and a lady came through and ordered a number 9 medium. Then, immediately after, the same lady orders a number 9 small as if it was the exact same voice clip but with a different ending. And at the window, it was the exact same lady, like complete doppelgangers. And what made me really start losing it and inspired me to write this all out was when I started to count how many voices were at the menu and how many heads showed up to the window. Sometimes they'll get to the order area and it's just this off cacophony of voices that I call the mumbles that eventually focuses in on one of the 20 different voices that they'll use. Or, very clearly 2 people will order and there will be others talking in the car, and then only one person shows up to the window. Their behavior directly correlates with the Schumann resonance. I pay near constant attention to the Schumann as it affects me very directly every day, and when weird stuff happens with it, the customers start freaking out. All of this nonsensical bullshit gets turned up to 11 immediately. Sometimes, I wonder if this is known by the people who run the franchises. We make more money and get more customers than any other restaurant this side of the state, and still, they constantly demand that we cut employees. They never fix anything, and they make nonsensical rules that seem maximized to cause us employees suffering. I think this place is a farm, and I am not one of the farmers. It only makes logical sense under the framework of causing me and the other employees as much distress as possible to farm loosh. And here's the riddle for this video. Hello everyone, it's your creepy sister here. Thank you so much for watching the video. I really appreciate it. I would also like to give some extra love to my Patreon members, my channel members, and also my tippers. Thank you so much. If you would like to extend a little bit more support for the channel, don't forget to leave a like and a comment down below. If you would like to become a Patreon member, a channel member, a tipper, or even to buy merch, check out the links in the description below. Again, thank you. And I hope you stay scared because your fear feeds me.